back to the channel. Hope you're all doing well out there. And today we're going to go back to the early 90s for an action movie. But before we get into this, do me a favor, like, comment, and subscribe. Subscribe. I greatly would appreciate that. Also, as always, a shameless plug for my TeePublic store. Link for that in the description box below. And today we're going back to 93 for John Woo's first American film. And that movie is Hard Target. Hard Target came out August 20th of 1993. It's an hour and 37 minutes long. Although the unrated cut, which I watched, is 100 minutes long, had a budget of $18 million, and upon release it made $32.5 in America and $74 worldwide. This was, as I said, John Woo's first American film. Obviously, he'd done classics like Hard Boiled and whatnot. And after this, he would go on to do Broken Arrow in 96, which I like that film quite a bit. And then in 97 for the masterpiece, Face Off. In this film, we have Jean-Claude Van Damme as Chance Boudreaux. He is a Cajun, French Cajun. Lance Henriksen playing Emile Fouchon, our main bad guy, along with Arnold Vosloo playing his right-hand man, Pick. And Yancy Butler plays Natasha, or Nat, and she is searching for her father who has gone missing. This movie takes place in New Orleans and Louisiana swamps. That's where they filmed most of this film, and a little bit in Alabama. In this film, right at the beginning of the film, we see this gentleman basically running for his life, and we see a bunch of guys chasing him. He gets killed, falls into the river, and we're on our way. We're introduced to Nat. She shows up in New Orleans looking for her father, who is an ex-military vet living on the streets, who she has tried to get in contact with, can't seem to find him. So she starts poking around New Orleans and gets herself in a little bit of trouble, but Chance helps her out because he's a good guy, but he's down in his luck as well, and he helps her try to find her father, which they find out he was killed because this organization run by Fouchon, basically this is a play on the Most Dangerous Game. Rich people pay him to set up these hunts, and they find these homeless people that are down their luck and need the money, especially ex-vets, because they want a challenge. And pretty much this person who pays the money gets to hunt them down and kill them for sport. And that is pretty much it. And what we get is a great turn by Lance Henriksen and Arnold Vosloo. They are great together. They have great chemistry. Matter of fact, in the original cut, Woo's original cut focused on them more. And then Van Damme locked himself with his editor in the editing room and cut a bunch of their stuff out because, as he quoted to say, people are paying to see me in this movie, not Lance Henriksen. But I think Van Damme's great here. Getting into some of my positive, I think Van Damme's great here. He was building to this moment. He was coming off of Death Warrant and Lionheart in 1990, Double Impact in 91, which we just talked about a few weeks ago, Universal Soldier in 92, and then Nowhere to Run earlier in the year in 93. And after this, you go on to Time Cop, which ended up being, if I'm not mistaken, his highest grossing film. So he was building to this, and then with John Woo coming to America to make his first American film, it was very exciting stuff. And I remember this movie being released back in 93. I remember the trailers for it. I didn't get to see it in the theater, but I definitely rented it once at the rental market later that year, or even being in 94. It used to be longer until you got to the rental market. I can't remember when it was released, but I remember renting it quite a lot when I was a kid. Again, Van Damme's great. Henriksen's great. Vosloo's great. They have great chemistry. I think Yancy Butler's really good here. She's such an expressive face, especially in the famous scene with the snake. I think she does well playing off Van Damme, and they always make an excuse for why Van Damme has a thick accent, and they come up with it here as well. But every movie, they have to come up with something of why he sounds like that, and they do it here in a way that is natural to the area of the United States of America. Obviously, you got to talk about the elephant in the room, John Woo. I think he does a fantastic job here, and I can't believe this movie only cost $18 million. Looking back, watching it again last night, I mean, I've watched this many times over the years. I had this 4K for quite a little while now, and this isn't a case for physical media, but if you're a fan of this movie, this 4K is definitely worth it. The movie looks gorgeous. The 5.1 DTS track sounds great. There's some cool special features on there, an interview with John Woo, Yancy Butler, and Lance Henriksen. So if you're a fan of this movie, and it has the unrated cut on here, so if you're a fan of this movie, I highly recommend the 4K. But back to the movie. We have all the John Woo-isms here, the slow-mo, the doves, the badass action scenes, lots of gunfights, lots of gunplay. Yes, the action does reach over-the-top moments, but it's done in such a way that it just comes off, I'm going to say it again, completely badass. And you can't help but cheer for the amount of action you get here and the way it's pulled off. I mean, you could see everything that happens, which is another thing Woo was always great at. You see the geography of the scene, you can see everything that's going on, all the stunt work, and it comes off amazing. Considering, again, I was thinking about this last night when I rewatched this movie only cost $18 million, and most action movies today cannot compare to the amount of action and the level of violence they pull off in this movie, and they had to do it for real back then. They weren't using CGI in this movie, so the amount of action this movie puts I'd say almost every action movie ever put on Netflix to shame, or on streaming, period. I mean, the action is just jaw-dropping, the amount of stuff they were able to pull off. Real squibs, real action, real stunt work. I mean, it looks fantastic. I can't rave about it enough if you've never seen this movie. Again, it does reach heights of over-the-topness, but that's John Woo's every film he's ever done. And you know that going in, it's baked into the equation, and you just watch in awe of the stuff they were able to pull off here. Van Damme standing on the motorcycle, shooting at a car coming towards him. Jumping over landing on the roof and landing on his feet and shooting the gas tank for the car to explode. Physically, it makes no sense, but it looks amazing in slow motion, and John Woo makes it look like a painted masterpiece on the screen. So just a lot of fun stuff here. The snake scene where he grabs the snake and punches it. I mean, just stuff that lives in my memory since I was a teenager watching this movie. Just great stuff here, and it builds to a great action set piece in this warehouse where they call it the Mardi Gras graveyard, where they put all the floats that are no longer in use. And again, another excellent action scene. I can't say enough about, and they utilize Van Damme great here. You get all those Van Damme hand-to-hand combat fights that you would want, the martial arts stuff, and then you get tons of gunplay here. You get a rocket launcher in there, we get the explosions, everything you would ever want from an R-rated action film we get in one package, and it's called Hard Target. I remember renting this a lot. It's a movie I've liked for many, many years. Is there any downsides to it? I don't think so. This movie's The Most Dangerous Game, just jacked up to 11. It's definitely a playoff of that. Many movies used that. Surviving the Game was another one that was basically a playoff in The Most Dangerous Game. And a lot of movies use that as a template over the years. I think they do it really well here. And again, the villain performances by Hendrickson and Vosloo are great. I mean, this is before Vosloo did The Mummy, which would come later in his career. But I think they have great chemistry here, and they definitely make for formidable bad guys. And you need a good bad guy to go up against a really fun action hero, and we get that here in spades. I think Van Damme's utilized well here. He's not asked to go too crazy on emotions, but he does what he does best, and Woo definitely uses him in using all of his best traits, I would say, for this. Now, getting into some trivia before I give you my rating of this movie. Universal was a little worried about Woo because of his limited use of English. So they hired Sam Raimi to be a producer on this film. Sam Raimi and Rob Tappert came in to produce this film, and they've been friends forever, starting with the original Evil Dead movie. And the reason they brought Raimi in was they were worried because of his limited English. Now, everybody had respect for Woo, even Sam Raimi, but Sam Raimi never had any intentions of doing this, but Universal hired Sam Raimi to oversee the production personally, and if need be, take over and direct the movie. Sam Raimi was a big fan of John Woo, still is to this day. He had no intentions ever to do that. He was just happy to be working with John Woo, and John Woo is very respected on the set, but Raimi has said that he never had no intentions of ever replacing Woo, and he was just felt it was an honor to work with him. Woo's original cut for this movie was 2 hours long, as I said earlier, and Van Damme ended up cutting it down because Woo concentrated a little bit more on the villains. But actually, Van Damme's cut wasn't the cut that got released. It was more of a middling cut that ended up getting the release theatrically. And like I said, this Kino Lorber 4K has the 100-minute uncut version. I don't believe the Woo 2-hour cut was ever released. I'm sure there's a bootleg out there somewhere online you could find, but as far as I know, it's never had an official release. But you could definitely correct me down below if it has, but not to my knowledge, at least not in America. The movie got rated NC-17 because of the violence. This is a very violent movie. Matter of fact, I think Siskel and Ebert named this the most violent movie of 1993. I don't know if that's true. I have to go back to see what else was released that year, but it is a very violent movie, which makes it all more badass. It took them 7 times going back to the MPAA to get the R rating. And like I said, this is the unrated cut, 100-minute unrated cut. So a little bit more of that stuff's put back in. But at the end of the day, I think this is a fantastic R-rated action movie. It's definitely one of Van Damme's best films. I'm a big fan of Van Damme, especially his early work through the late 90s. So This is one of my favorites of his. It's one I grew up on. I remember renting the shit out of this from Broad Street Video in Tamaqua, Pennsylvania, and I would give Hard Target a 9 out of 10. A 9 out of 10 for Hard Target. What are your thoughts on this movie? Leave a comment down below. Let me know. Hit the thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, share this video. I greatly appreciate that. That's it for this one, but until next time,